everybody, thanks for joining. We're gonna get a lot of people who are gonna be joining today, and so I want to give everybody the opportunity to catch up. So if you're hearing the sound of my voice, that's great. We should be getting started relatively quickly here. So just hang out for a few minutes while everybody else catches up, and we'll get started soon. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon. Oh, looks like we have our first cluster of people. So, hey, I'm Trigby with Bizzyweb. Thanks for joining me today. We are going to get started in just a few minutes. I want to there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be online today. So I want to give everybody the opportunity to log in. I should, right now on my clock, it's 11:02. I'll probably be starting at 11:04. For coming back. We're going to get started in just a minute or two. This is going to be a live presentation. This isn't canned or anything like that. So we're hoping to give everybody the opportunity to log in and get started in about 1 to 2 minutes. I just want to we're expecting a lot of people here today, so I want to make sure that we let everybody join in who is planning on joining in. So should be getting started in just a minute. Please hang out. Don't worry, everything's working on our end. So if you don't hear anything, I will be back with you in just 1 minute. Looks like we're getting pretty close to critical mass, so we'll get started in just a second. So for those of you who are just joining, I'm just giving everybody the opportunity to catch up and log on so that we can, so nobody misses anything. So give me just 1 more minute and we'll get started. Actually, I guess I said that a minute ago, so let's go ahead and get started. Hey, everybody. My name is Trigby. I'm the Director of Business Development at Bizzyweb. I also used to be a Constant Contact ALE and used to be part of the Constant Contact family when they had one. So today we're going to be talking about social media goofs. I have found a collection of really just terribly epic marketing mistakes that companies have made over the last 9-10 months of the year, and we're going to be reviewing them and hopefully having a little bit of a laugh, but then also being able to hopefully learn from it as well. So if you need to get a hold of me, this is what passes for a good picture of me, which is often a little challenging. But if you want to contact me, this is my contact information. If you want a copy of the deck afterwards, if you just want to compliment me being funny, I always appreciate that. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Bizzyweb, we are a full-service digital agency based in Minneapolis, St. Paul. So we do everything under the sun as it relates to your digital footprint. So we can build you a website, grow the audience to that website, get that audience to take actions, and translate that action into bottom line results for your business. So if you're interested in learning more about it, please check us out at bizzyweb.com, or if you can feel free and reach out to me personally. But let's go ahead and get started and let's have some fun. So here's what I'm going to do, and here's how I'm going to break down this today. So first of all, obviously, given the political climate and the world we live in, I do want to set some ground rules. So hopefully you understand that I'm not meaning to offend. We're just meaning to learn a little. Second, I'm going to talk about one of the main themes today, which is Schadenfreude, which is a German word meaning happiness at the misfortune of others. We'll talk about that a little. I'll go through my top 10 list so far of the year. Some of them might be new to you. Some of them you might have seen before, but we'll talk about some lessons, and then we'll talk about how do you bounce back from that mistake? How do you make sure that that doesn't happen to you again in the future? So let's go ahead and get started. So here's the ground rules. This stuff is fairly inflammatory. And obviously, depending upon which way you politically lean, there could be a whole wealth of other things out in the thing I'm going to do is not really talk about politics. Well, okay, maybe I am going to talk about politics just a little, at least to make it somewhat funny. So next, nothing inflammatory, nothing that is truly detrimental or just plain wrong. I mean, a lot of this is going to be just plain wrong, but nothing that's out of the box meant to insult any particular group. And then third, at Bizzyweb, we tend to make up words. This is my word of the day. It's edutainmentable. So it has to be educational. It has to be entertaining, and we have to be able to learn from it. So with that, I want to talk about my favorite word, which is schadenfreude. If you're not familiar with schadenfreude, it's great. There's also a song called Schadenfreude in Avenue Q, which is a Broadway musical. And the definition of it is pleasure derived from somebody else's misfortune. So that's what we're going to try and do here today. We're going to try and learn about and be better social media users, better social media influencers by learning from other people's mistakes. So basically, what my point here is, I want to say that it's okay to laugh at this because it should be a little bit funny as long as we learn a little something for it. So, okay, let's go ahead and get started. So the first one that I want to bring up today, obviously a lot of people know, given the events of the last weekend about the NFL and people kneeling in protest during the national anthem. So everybody should be relatively familiar with this guy. His name's Colin Kaepernick. He used to be the quarterback of the 49ers. This was last year. This was a fairly unique proposition for him to take, and obviously he's started a maelstrom of conversation about so many different topics. So he was cut from the 49ers over the offseason and was looking to sign with a new team. And so one of the teams that was almost going to sign with him was a team called the Baltimore Ravens, based in Baltimore. Trouble is, while the Baltimore Ravens were considering signing him, Mr. Kaepernick's girlfriend posted this image, which is, so if you're not really up on your Baltimore Ravens football, that's okay. The guy on the top left is Steve Bisciotti. He's the owner of the Baltimore Ravens. And then the guy on the right is Ray Lewis, who is the best Baltimore Raven player, sort of like their iconic player. And then on the bottom, it was a scene from a Quentin Tarantino movie, which was about slavery and just a whole lot of racism. So I believe that she didn't say anything, so it's hard to really define what her motivation was, but based on what the image said, it was obvious that she wanted to say that Ray wasn't acting in anybody's best interest, but only working within the team. Trouble is, the real story was Ray Lewis was the guy who was actually advocating to have the Ravens sign Kaepernick to be part of the team. So she went out of her way to insult the one guy who was trying to do the right thing by her boyfriend. So what can we learn from this? How do we change this? How do we make sure that we don't do something like this? Well, first of all, it's important to realize sort of the concept of social media. You are having one-to-one interactions with people, and you might think something, but remember that sharing with that is permanent. And so the reason, tennis match, yes, you're interacting on a one-to-one basis, but you're doing so in an arena filled with thousands and thousands of people. So all of those people are going to be able to see it. You can't really ever take it back. And grown up has understood this at some point in their life, that you never really know who's advocating on your behalf. So being generally respectful is always a good idea. There are ways in which you can present your point of view without insulting somebody else, and usually that's the first step towards quality listening. And third and finally, sticking up for somebody only really works if you don't dramatically insult the other person. So again, in this instance, Ray Lewis was trying to advocate for Colin Kaepernick. His girlfriend kind of ruined that. So, and Kaepernick's still unsigned as to this day. So that's our first one. Let's get into the second one. This is one of my favorite ones. This is really a contextual, just colossal error. So this is the concept of evergreen content is something that has been around for a while, but what evergreen content means is it's always ready to go and it's always green. And so when Adidas wanted to celebrate anybody who finished the Boston Marathon, up until a couple of years ago, they had really good evergreen content, which is they sent you an email saying, congratulations, you survived the Boston Marathon. Fortunately, that didn't really happen. That really was just very, very bad considering what happened in Boston several years ago at the marathon with the bombing. Saying that you survived the Boston Marathon takes on a completely different meaning now than it did 5 years ago. So somebody really should have checked that. Somebody should have come back to that and figured out, hey, that needed to be changed. So what are the lessons that we can learn from this massive PR fluke? It's important that you use tools to make social media easier for you, and you can set out content to go out, but don't forget it. Always be mindful of what you're going to be posting on behalf of you or your company. And if things change in the world around you, don't forget it, and don't remember you really sometimes should just go back and change it. So second, what's clever to you might be hurtful for others. So obviously running a marathon is a feat. And so surviving on the one sense is true, but it's also hurtful to others and hurtful to those people who lost their lives at the marathon or even after the marathon. So third, remember that words really do matter, and words really can hurt. As much as we'd like to think that our meaning in our own head is what's paramount, often the way in which you describe something and the words you use to describe something are just as important as what your meaning is. So this is a bit of a doozy. This kind of gets into one of the things that I think we do really well here at Bizzyweb, which is the meaning of color. You know, a lot of times you'll see black or red being very aggressive colors, and white meaning to be very simple and clear, and even representing in olden times representing purity. That's sort of true, but it's also not a good campaign for a face wash. And this is something that Nivea put out earlier this year in March. What they meant was, I think, that your skin is good, and the good context matters, certainly. Even though really the meaning was one thing, the context in which they presented it wasn't very clear, because sometimes brevity really isn't a good thing. Every read of tag is very helpful. Sometimes is very positive. Oftentimes it's really not. And it's actually insulting in some way. Somebody will truly be insulted, and that's hard for. But if something doesn't necessarily mean what you think it means, then chances are good you really do need to change it. This is one. If you remember who won Best Picture this year at the Oscars, well, it was kind of interpretive depending upon what time you tuned in. The actual winner was a movie called Moonlight, but the presenters were given something else that said La La Land. That is The way the Academy Awards work is there's 2 people on each side of the stage with all the envelopes. They have duplicate envelopes. And so whichever way the presenters walks out, the people hand them the right envelope, and they go out and they present it. Problem was, the guy who was handing out the best picture envelope, which was really like one of the last envelopes that he had in his person, he was tweeting about how great it was to be at the Academy Awards. So as a result of that, he gave out the wrong envelope, and we had that giant faux pas that literally most of the world actually saw. So what's the lessons that we can learn from this? Well, pretty obviously, you need to have your head on a swivel. Social media is a great recording device to talk about what did happen and great sharing of memories, but you actually have to be aware of what's actually happening in the world around you right now. A lot of times you'll see sort of that sort of stereotypical millennial thing where a millennial will walk into a wall because they're looking at their phone. That does actually happen. And so the best thing you can do, keep your head up and realize that social media is a tool. It's not really a way of life. Otherwise, you might hand out the wrong envelope. And that guy actually lost his job just by handing out the wrong envelope because he was tweeting. So, okay, now we're really getting to the meat and potatoes of what we're going to talk about today. I promised you that I wouldn't go into a lot of politics, but I did want to hit some political things. Specifically, I wanted to talk about Sean Spicer, who used to be the head communications person at the White House. He was also the press secretary. And in January, he tweeted this, which more than likely was his password. Do we know what it was his password to? Well, no, but it's an awfully goofy set of things to post if it doesn't actually result in a password. So more than likely what happened is Sean Spicer tweeted his password. So what can we learn from that? Well, number one, be careful what you post at all times. If you're trying to go very fast, if you're leading a fast-paced life, it's always good to take one deep breath and look at what you're doing before you post it out there, because there's no way to pull it back. Secondly, again, if you want to just make life easier, have a more memorable password, like 1234. That's my password, or password 1234. That'll read it out. Nobody's going to be the wiser. So obviously, I'm kidding here. Please don't actually do that. I'm not really advocating for that, but it's just be mindful of what you're doing, especially when you're doing a lot of cutting and pasting and you have a lot of different windows open. You want to make sure that that social media window is pulled off so that you don't skip over that, which is, I think, what happened. So I jumped ahead too much here, but I double-clicked too quickly. But our next one is from somebody asking Wendy, Wendy's, the Twitter account for Wendy's, hey, can you point me to the nearest McDonald's? And Wendy says, sure, and post a picture of a garbage can. Number one, that wasn't really the intended result. Number two, it was a pretty snarky response, which something that the Wendy's Twitter feed is pretty famous for. And I encourage you to check it out, because whoever does the Wendy's Twitter feed is very, very funny. So obviously, because Wendy's has close to 1 million followers, this was a big deal, and this was funny on top of it. So what can we learn from something like this? Well, number one, if you're gonna ask a question, be prepared for a silly answer or a punny one. It doesn't mean that you're asking a bad question, but if somebody can make a pun out of it, more than likely they should. If you follow me on Twitter or on Facebook, more than likely that's the kind of response you'll get, because I think I'm a lot funnier than I actually am. So that's an outlet for me, and that's how I use it, and sometimes inappropriately, but I try not to. So next, always have a good sense of humor about it. If somebody gives you a response that isn't what you were hoping for, if it makes you laugh, great. Remember that you are on a tennis court surrounded by thousands and thousands of people watching you to keep an eye on what you're doing. So if it's not what you wanted, that's okay. Just laugh about it and move on. Third, this is a good test. So everybody remembers Steve Carell in The Office and his famous, he would always say, "That's what she said." So what I like to do when I'm tweeting on behalf of an organization is actually read what I say and then say, "Well, that's what she said." And if it if the joke that I just made is kind of nonsensical and doesn't actually work, well, then it's probably a good thing to tweet out or post or pin. But if it can be taken in a different context, like, again, somebody asking for directions and getting a picture of a trash can, chances are good they will. So that's a good way to avoid how you can do that again in the future. Next, I wanted to talk about United Airlines, but there were just so many different screw-ups, faux pas, mess-ups as possible. I really just wanted to kind of sum it up in one big tweet here, which I thought was pretty funny, that there was a fight club on an airplane. So normally I do this with my friend Jenna, who works here at Bizzyweb, but she's actually on a plane right now. So Jenna, if you're watching me on Wi-Fi, good luck in the fight club. So a lot of things that United Airlines did wrong. A lot of people smarter than I am really delved into it in great detail, but in sort of the 10,000 foot level, here's a couple of lessons we can learn from that. Number one, don't throw doctors off planes. It might be a silly thing to think of, but just don't do that. If somebody is going to try and help and save somebody else's life, leave them alone on the plane. More importantly than that, second, everyone around you has a camera. Everyone around you has a camera on their phone. It's a supercomputer that they are more than willing to whip out and record anything that is inappropriate or divisive at any time. So keep that in mind every single time. One of the big problems that United Airlines had was that after the doctor got thrown off the plane, the CEO of United Airlines let out a statement which was basically explaining how it wasn't United Airlines' fault, which put them deeper in the hole. If you are going to apologize for something, actually make it genuine and make it real. Otherwise, it's not going to go anywhere. This is one of my favorite ones coming up next. And again, this is sort of maybe looking at the third rail of politics, but I promise it won't be too bad. During Black History Month, the U.S. Department of Education posted a poignant quote from W.E.B. Du Bois, but they spelled his name wrong. It's spelled D-U-B-O-I-S, not D-E-B-O-I-S. So not really what you want to see from the Department of Education, of all people. And they figured that out relatively quickly. So much so that they sent out an apology tweet, which said, "Our deepest apologizes for the earlier typo." So they actually made it worse by not paying attention to the grammar from the Department of Education. Whoops. So what can we learn from this? Some of the things we've talked about before. Think before you tweet. Make sure that things are right. If you're quoting other people, make sure it's right. There's that famous Abraham Lincoln quote that says that 60% of all things you read on the internet are wrong. There's a reason why that's out there. It's because people tend to misstep and misquote things. So when you're trying to use social media as an advocacy for your business and to show that you really are a leader in what you do, make sure that you're not screwing up. Second, scheduling posts are your friend. There's a number of different tools you can use to schedule posts that you can then go back and review at a later date to make sure that your content is evergreen, make sure that you aren't missing anything, or even have a second set of eyes look at it before it goes out. It's one of the things we do at Bizzyweb. We make sure that everything we post on behalf of our clients is first seen by our clients, so they're okay with it. Third and finally, if you're in a hole, stop digging. If you just having a bad day and you can't get anything right, it happens to the best of us. It's happened to me more times than I want to count. No matter what I do, just doesn't end up being right. So if that happens to you, realize that you're having a bad day and just stop digging. This is my favorite one, and I don't really have a lot of lessons, but it's really a great mic drop moment at the end. So I'm hoping that all of you remember the Pepsi commercial with Kylie Jenner, who it was supposed to be an homage to Black Lives Matter, but it was so utterly terrible and so utterly classless that they pulled it within a day. One of the best responses to this whole campaign was from Martin Luther King's daughter, which is one of my favorite things that I've ever seen, which is she said, If only Daddy would have known about the power of Pepsi. So pretty good slam on her part, and a pretty good takedown of the whole ad concept altogether. So what can we learn from this? Well, realize that there's not really a lot to learn. If you're gonna it was just a really king-sized mic drop on behalf of Bernice King. But I guess if I were to come up with a lesson to be learned from this, I would say remember that the world is flat, and sometimes celebrities will see things that you do. Well, let me back up. The world is flat, informationally speaking, when it comes to social media. I don't actually believe the world is flat. I know that celebrities will chime in, at which point you will have an avalanche of information to deal with. So make sure that if you're quoting other people, or if you're you're on point. So the good news is there's a fairly easy formula to follow to actually come back from something like this. So first thing you want to do is you want to acknowledge the blunder immediately. If you made a mistake, fine. Own up to it, say that you made a mistake, and make sure that you do so publicly. Second, don't censor negative feedback. A lot of people will want to jump on you for making a mistake. That's okay. It's a great opportunity for you to show all of those people how quickly you learn from a mistake and how you acknowledge even negative feedback. Third, which is the United Airlines bit, put a real face on a genuine apology. If you can do a video, do a video. Explain how you screwed up and explain how you're never going to let this happen again, so that people who are buying from you and talking to you and engaging with you realize that you're not making an apology just to make an apology. You're making it because it's the right thing to do. Next, make sure that you are transparent on how you're fixing it. If you made a bad mistake, let people know that you did it. And again, let them know how you're going to fix it so it doesn't happen again in the future. Engage your advocates, those people who you know are always going to be with you and always going to be working with you because they love you. Have them be your advocates to help come back from the mistake and explain to people that you're not a bad person. Have them show a fresh purchase that you've done. And oops, I'm sorry, I accidentally hit the escape button on my monitor because I'm speaking with my hands. So give me a second while I get back to that. And there we go. We're back on number. See, I made a mistake and I'm immediately acknowledging it, which would be super awesome if I did on purpose, but I didn't. So I'm going to learn from that by pushing the keyboard monitor away and not doing that again. Getting back to it. There we go. So, and here's the mic drop. Boom. Next. There we go. Next, don't forget what the mistake you made and actually learn from it. Remember that there's a great song lyric from the Google Dolls that says that scars are souvenirs you never lose. Own your mistakes and keep them with you so you don't make them ever again. Next, make sure you share your experience with others. Social media itself is a tool that can be used either for good or for not for good, as we see all around the world around us all the time. So talk about how you made a mistake and what you're doing to fix it. More than likely, people are going to appreciate and learn from your mistake as well. And lastly, I want to make sure that you're not scared off by something like this. If you make a mistake, everybody makes a mistake. If you're an entrepreneur, you're going to make tons of mistakes, but keep working at it, keep growing, keep talking and engaging with people. Don't let a mistake scare you off and want to do something else. Just like I did here where I accidentally hit the escape key on my keyboard, I kept going and I'm going to finish up. So wanted to give you a couple of more links before I wrapped up. If you are interested in learning more about Bizzyweb trainings, we do 3 or 4 of these a month. And you can go to bizzyweb.com/events. Next, I do have an ebook that I'm going to send out to everybody to talk about how to improve your social marketing. you can get to it right now before I send it out. Or again, if you just want to contact me and tell me how much you enjoyed this, or tell me how much I could have done differently, more than happy to listen. Please feel free and reach out to me at trigby@bizzyweb.com. I know a lot of you are from around the country. That's great. We'd love to hear more from you. Easiest way to do that is to join our email list. You can text Busy to 22828 and you'll be able to join our list. So thanks everybody for joining me. Again, my name's Trigby from Bizzyweb in Minneapolis and St. Paul. Thank you so much for listening. Hopefully I was mildly entertaining and funny. We'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, the next Day of Digital seminar will be coming up at 12:30. So thanks everybody for joining.